Shy Waitress greeted the Five Boroughs Don, a Mafia boss, in a foreign dialect. The restaurant froze. She was just the girl who poured the water, invisible, trembling, nobody. Or so they thought. The night Don Sylvester Wardwell walked into the Gilded Lily, the heir left the room. Men who owned islands were sweating in their summer linens. But when the Shy Waitress approached the terrace, she didn't drop a tray or stutter. She looked the most dangerous man in Florida in the eye and spoke 5 words in a dialect that hasn't been heard outside the mountains of Sicily since 1847. The room didn't just go silent. It froze. Because that wasn't a greeting. It was a death sentence. And only 3 people in the room knew why. This is the story of Isolde, the waitress who was hiding a kingdom beneath her apron. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comment section where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's get into the story. The dinner service at the Gilded Lily was less of a shift and more of a synchronized panic attack. Perched on Worth Avenue in the heart of Palm Beach, the restaurant was a cathedral of gold leaf, Italian marble, and old money. It was the kind of place where a single appetizer cost more than Isolde's monthly rent, and the clientele spoke in hushed tones about offshore accounts, foundation boards, and things that would land ordinary people in federal prison. Isolde Thatcher tightened her apron strings until they dug into her waist. She checked her reflection in the polished brass of the espresso machine. Dark circles under her eyes, a messy bun pulled too tight, a uniform that was a size too big. She looked exactly like what she aimed to be. Forgettable. Thatcher, table 9 needs sparkling water. Now. The floor manager, a gaunt man named Casper Norwood who smelled perpetually of bay rum and desperation, snapped his fingers in her face. Yes, sir, right away, Isolde whispered, keeping her eyes on her polished black flats. She moved through the dining room like a ghost. That was her gift. She had learned a long time ago that survival meant not being seen. If you were invisible, you couldn't be hurt. If you were quiet, you couldn't be targeted. For 3 years, she had been a ghost in Palm Beach, paying cash for her studio apartment above a dry cleaner, working off the books when she could, and never, ever looking anyone in the eye for longer than a second. But tonight, the air in the Gilded Lily felt heavy. It wasn't the usual Friday night tension. It was thicker, sharper. The kitchen staff had been on edge since 4 p.m. The head chef, a temperamental Italian who usually threw sauté pans for sport, was meticulously wiping down the marble counters himself. "Big party coming in," whispered Elena, one of the hostesses, as she straightened menus near Isolde. The owner called, said to clear the entire VIP terrace. Isolde felt a prickle of unease at the base of her neck. "Who is it? A governor?" Elena shook her head, her eyes wide. "Bigger! It's the Wardwells." The crystal water pitcher in Isolde's hand slipped just an inch before she caught it. A splash of ice water hit her wrist. Wardwell. The name was like a curse word in certain neighborhoods. In the society pages, they were real estate magnates and philanthropists. In the dark corners of the 5 boroughs where Isolde tried not to tread, they were the law. Atticus Wardwell was the face of the new generation, handsome, brutal, and Ivy League. But if they were clearing the terrace, it meant the old guard was in town. The Don. "I need to go on break," Isolde said, her voice trembling slightly. "No breaks," Norwood barked from the pass. "They're here. Line up by the terrace stairs. Everyone." Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She couldn't leave. To run now would draw attention. To be noticed was to die. She took her place at the end of the line of servers, keeping her head down, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in years that she would remain invisible. The front doors swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. First came the security. 4 men in dark suits who looked like they were carved out of granite, scanning the room with dead eyes. Then came Atticus Kingsford. Isolde risked a glance through her lashes. He was terrifyingly striking, wearing a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther, his dark hair perfectly styled, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. He looked like a man who was bored with violence, but very, very good at it. But the room didn't freeze for Atticus. It froze for the man walking behind him. Don Sylvester Wardwell, the Five Boroughs Don of the old world. He was in his late 60s, leaning heavily on an ivory cane topped with a gold eagle's head. He wore a Panama hat and a cream linen suit, looking like a relic from a different era. His face was a map of scars and deep lines, his eyes hidden behind amber-tinted glasses. Silence swept through the restaurant. Forks stopped midair. Conversations died. Norwood was practically vibrating with nerves. "Welcome, Don Wardwell. Mr. Kingsford, it is an honor." Atticus raised a hand, cutting him off. "The table. Now." "Of course. Right this way." As the procession moved past the line of staff, Isolde held her breath. "Don't look up. Don't look up. Don't look up." Don Sylvester stopped. He was standing right in front of her. The scent of expensive cigars and sea salt washed over her. Isolde stared at the polished tips of his white bucks. "This one," Sylvester said. His voice was like grinding gravel. "She's shaking." Atticus sighed, sounding exhausted. "Father, let's sit. The girl is just nervous." "Fear is good," Sylvester murmured. He tapped Isolde's shoe with his cane. "Look at me, Bambina." Isolde squeezed her eyes shut for a microsecond, summoning every ounce of the persona she had crafted. The shy, terrified nobody. She looked up, widening her eyes, letting her lower lip tremble. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, pitching her voice higher than usual. I've never seen a real famous person before." Sylvester stared at her. His eyes, dark and intelligent, bored into hers. For a second, Isolde thought he saw right through the uniform, right through the fear, down to the blood in her veins. Then he laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "Famous. Yes." He leaned closer. "Bring us the wine, little mouse, and don't drop it." They moved on. Isolde exhaled, realizing her knees were actually knocking together. She had survived the arrival, but the night had only just begun. Isolde had perfected the art of being nobody. It wasn't just an act. It was architecture. Every movement calculated, every breath measured. The oversized uniform that made her look smaller, younger, harmless. The way she kept her shoulders curved inward, her chin tucked. The practiced habit of looking at chins instead of eyes, at hands instead of faces. 3 years of this careful construction, this deliberate erasure of self. Because to be seen was to be remembered. And to be remembered was to die. The gilded lily didn't just employ her, it allowed her to vanish. In a restaurant where billionaires argued over wine vintages and heiresses picked at $28 salads, a forgettable waitress was part of the scenery. Less important than the hand-painted Portuguese tiles. Less memorable than the orchid arrangements that cost more than her weekly wage. She moved between tables like water, finding its level, smooth, silent, leaving no trace. "Thatcher, polish the glassware on Station 3. "Yes, Mr. Norwood." "Thatcher, the Merricks at Table 7 need more bread." "Right away, Mr. Norwood." She never complained, never made eye contact, never gave them a single reason to look twice. Tonight should have been like any other Friday. The usual parade of wealth and excess, the familiar rhythm of pouring and clearing and fading into the background. But the moment Caspar Norwood cleared the VIP terrace and sent the sommelier home early, Isolde knew something had shifted. The kitchen fell into an unnatural quiet. Even the head chef, a volatile man who screamed in 3 languages, worked in tense silence, his hands steady as he plated course after course of food that would never be criticized, never be sent back. Fear had a smell. Isolde had learned that 20 years ago, the night her world ended in gunfire and screaming. It smelled like copper and sweat, and expensive cologne masking something rotten underneath. The gilded lily smelled like that now. When the Wardwells walked through the door, Isolde felt the past reach across 2 decades and wrap its fingers around her throat. Don Sylvester Wardwell, the man whose name had been whispered like a curse in her childhood home. The man her father had called Il Diavolo, the devil. The man who had ordered the execution of every living Wycliffe. Except one. She stood in that line of servers, her heart a war drum in her chest, and forced herself to breathe, to stay small, to remain invisible. And this was just another shift, just another faceless encounter with the city's elite. But when Don Sylvester stopped in front of her, when his cane tapped against her shoe and his voice commanded her to look up, Isolde knew with absolute certainty that tonight wasn't about survival. Tonight was about whether the ghost of Worth Avenue could stay dead, or whether Isolde Wycliffe would claw her way back from the grave and drag them all to hell with her. Atticus Kingsford unbuttoned his suit jacket as he sat, scanning the terrace with the practiced eye of a man who trusted nothing and no one. The space was secure, his men positioned at the stairs and the kitchen entrance, sightlines clear. Still, he couldn't relax. Having his father in Palm Beach was a liability wrapped in linen and nostalgia. Sylvester didn't understand that the world had changed. He didn't care about federal task forces or digital surveillance. He wanted respect. He wanted wine. And he wanted to remind Atticus that the old ways, the blood ways, still mattered. The architecture is soulless, Sylvester grumbled, gesturing vaguely at the vaulted ceilings with his cane. Like a bank. You eat in a bank, Atticus. It's modern, father. It's what people expect, Atticus replied, signaling for the sommelier. People expect what we tell them to expect. Sylvester looked around the table. His consigliere Gideon Fenwick and 2 of his personal guards sat in respectful silence. Where is the mouse? I want wine. Atticus watched the terrified waitress approach, her hands trembling as she carried the bottle of Barolo like it might explode. She was small, pale, and with dark eyes that darted everywhere except at the table itself. She's going to faint, Atticus thought. Another mess to clean up. But as she reached the table and began to open the bottle, something shifted. The trembling stopped. Her movements became precise, fluid. The leverage perfect, the pop barely a whisper. She poured without spilling a single drop. Professional, practiced, interesting. She placed the glass in front of Sylvester, keeping her eyes lowered. The old Don swirled the wine, took a sniff, and then looked up at her with that mischievous glint Atticus knew too well. He was going to test her. He always tested the help. It was a power play he enjoyed, watching commoners squirm. You are Italian? Sylvester asked in English. Yes, sir. My grandmother, she whispered. Where from? Naples, sir. Sylvester scoffed, in waving a dismissive hand. Naples, noisy people, thieves and singers. Atticus saw it, just a flicker across the waitress's face. Not fear, something harder. It looked like insulted pride. Sylvester leaned forward, switching to standard Italian. Do you understand this? Or are you just an American girl with a vowel at the end of her name? I understand a little, signore, she replied in broken Italian. Sylvester smirked. He turned to Gideon, and Atticus felt his stomach tighten. He knew what was coming. His father switched languages again, this time into the thick, guttural dialect of the Sicilian interior. The archaic mountain tongue of shepherds and warlords, incomprehensible even to most Italians. A language that hadn't been spoken openly in America since the old families went underground. "Look at her, Gideon," Sylvester said, grinning. "Pretty face but empty eyes, like a lamb waiting for slaughter. Probably doesn't even know her own family name. Another American bastarda playing dress-up in her grandmother's skin." It was crude, deliberate. Sylvester often said shocking things in the dialect to see if anyone flinched. If they understood, they revealed themselves. If they didn't, they were safe. Atticus stiffened. "Father, enough." But then it happened. The waitress had been backing away, tray clutched to her chest. She should have just walked away. Should have kept being the invisible girl. She stopped. She turned back to the table. Atticus watched, confused. Was she going to cry? Complain to the manager? The waitress looked directly at Sylvester. The fear was gone from her face. Her posture shifted, shoulders back, chin lifted. For a terrifying moment, she looked like royalty. She opened her mouth, and the sound that came out was not the high-pitched whisper of a frightened girl. It was low, guttural, perfect. "A pecora ca sopravvive e ci dà Catalia u lupo dormiri, Don Wardwell. È un invitato ca nzurta u pani di l'anfitrioni mangiaciniria mattina." The sheep that survives is the one that watches the wolf sleep, Don Wardwell. And a guest who insults the host's bread eats ash come morning. She spoke in the dialect. Not just Sicilian, his dialect. The specific archaic phrasing of the mountain strongholds. Words that hadn't been common since the 1940s. The cadence of the old families. The crash was deafening. Gideon had dropped his fork. The two guards instantly reached inside their jackets, eyes locked on the girl. But Atticus didn't move. He couldn't. He was staring at his father. For the first time in his life, he saw Don Sylvester Wardwell look truly stunned. The old man's face had gone white beneath his tan. His hand, still holding the wineglass, began to tremble. "Wycliffe," Sylvester whispered, and the room held its breath. Isolde didn't wait for the shock to wear off. The instant Sylvester's face went white, the instant that name, Wycliffe, left his lips like a curse, she moved. 20 years of survival instinct kicked in, overriding the paralysis of fear. She dropped the empty wine bottle on the nearest table and turned on her heel. "Stop her!" Sylvester's voice cracked across the terrace like a whip. But Isolde was already gone. She didn't run. Running drew attention. She walked with purpose through the dining room, weaving between tables of startled patrons, her mind a cold, calculating machine. On kitchen exit, back alley, Ocean Boulevard, disappear. "Thatcher!" Caspar Norwood materialized in front of her, his gaunt face twisted in confusion and panic. "What the hell did you do? Mr. Wardwell is—" She shoved past him hard enough that he stumbled into a dessert cart. Behind her, she heard the terrace erupt into chaos, chairs scraping. Gideon Fenwick's gravelly voice barking orders, the heavy footfalls of men who killed for a living. Isolde hit the kitchen at full speed. The line cooks looked up in surprise as she sprinted past the grill station, past the walk-in freezer, toward the back delivery entrance. The head chef shouted something in Italian, but she was already slamming through the metal door into the humid Florida night. Thunder rumbled overhead. The sky had opened up, a tropical downpour that turned Worth Avenue into a river of neon reflections and palm fronds. Perfect. Isolde kicked off her sensible flats and ran barefoot across the slick pavement, the rain plastering her hair to her face, washing away the careful invisibility she'd worn like armor. She tore off her apron, let it fall into a puddle, ripped the name tag from her uniform. Isolde Thatcher was dead. Only the Wycliffe remained. She cut through an alley behind a jewelry store, vaulted over a wrought iron fence, and emerged onto a side street where late-night tourists huddled under awnings. She grabbed a forgotten shopping bag from a bench, stuffed her uniform shirt inside, and kept moving in just her black undershirt and slacks. Blend, adapt, survive. Her car, a 15-year-old Honda she'd bought for cash, was parked 3 blocks away in a public lot. If she could reach it, she had a chance. Fake ID, go bag in the trunk, $2,000 in emergency cash. She could disappear into the Everglades, hitch a ride north, vanish into... There, Gideon Fenwick's voice cut through the rain. Isolde's head snapped around. 2 of Sylvester's guards were rounding the corner, their suits soaked, their faces grim and focused. One was speaking rapidly into a phone. She ran. Her bare feet slapped against wet concrete as she tore down a palm-lined street, past art galleries and boutiques that sold $1,000 handbags. The guards were faster, trained, relentless. She could hear them gaining. Then headlights flooded the street. A black Mercedes SUV screeched to a halt in front of her, not blocking her path. The driver's door opened, and Atticus Kingsford stepped out into the rain. He wasn't holding a gun. He didn't need to. End of the line, he said quietly. Isolde spun, looking for an escape route, but Gideon and the other guards had closed in from behind. She was boxed in, trapped between the ocean and the devil's sun. "My father wants you alive," Atticus continued, water streaming down his face. "That's the only reason you're still breathing. Get in the car." "So he can finish what he started 20 years ago." Isolde's voice was raw, stripped of pretense. "So he can put a bullet in the last Wycliffe and sleep better at night?" Something flickered across Atticus's face. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. "You know what happened," she said. "You know what your family did. My father, my mother, my brothers." Her voice cracked. "I was 9 years old." "I was 12, Atticus said flatly. "And I didn't pull the trigger. But you're here now, doing his work." "Yes." Thunder cracked overhead, and in that moment of white light, Isolde saw it clearly. The truth that had been lurking in the back of her mind since she'd opened her mouth on that terrace. She couldn't run anymore. Couldn't hide. The only way out was through, back to the source of her pain, back to the secrets her father had died protecting. The red ledger. If it still existed, if Thaddeus Whitmore had kept his promise, then she had leverage. She had a weapon. She had a chance to burn the Wardwell empire to the ground. But first, she had to survive the night. "I'll get in the car," Isolde said, meeting Atticus's eyes. "Or on one condition." "You don't get to make conditions. Tell your father I'll give him what he really wants." She smiled, cold and sharp. "I'll tell him where my father hid the ledger." Atticus went very still. Behind him, Gideon's phone conversation stopped mid-sentence. "You're bluffing," Atticus said. "Am I?" The rain poured down between them, and for a long moment, the only sound was water and thunder and the distant wail of sirens. Then Atticus pulled out his phone. "Father? We have a situation." The marina at Lake Worth was a graveyard for boats that had seen better decades. Atticus drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Isolde sat in the passenger seat with Gideon's gun pressed casually against her ribs. The 2 guards followed in a second vehicle, and their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights hunting for prey. "Turn left at the bait shop," Isolde said quietly. Atticus's jaw tightened. "If you're lying about the ledger, then your father will kill me. I know how this works." The phone call had been brief. Sylvester's voice crackling through the speaker with barely controlled fury, demanding proof, demanding blood. But when Isolde mentioned Thaddeus Whitmore's name, a name that hadn't been spoken aloud in the 5 boroughs since the Wycliffe Purge, the old Don had gone silent. Bring her, he'd finally said. And bring me that briefcase. Tonight. The marina appeared through the rain like something out of a noir film. Warped docks, rusted boats listing in their slips, the smell of diesel and rot thick in the humid air. A single flickering light marked the harbor master's office, but the building looked abandoned. He's here, Isolde said, nodding toward a decrepit fishing trawler at the far end of the dock. Atticus killed the engine. Gideon, sweep the perimeter. You two, watch the access road. He turned to Isolde. If this is an ambush, it's not. She opened the door, stepping out into ankle-deep puddles. Thaddeus doesn't do violence. He does secrets. They walked down the dock together, Atticus half a step behind her with his hand inside his jacket. The wood groaned beneath their feet, slick with algae and rain. Somewhere in the darkness, a pelican cried out like a warning. The trawler's name was barely visible beneath the grime. Kingmaker. Thaddeus, Isolde called softly. It's me. For a long moment, nothing. Then a light flickered on in the cabin, and an old man emerged onto the deck. He was ancient, rail-thin, with a shock of white hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore a rain slicker over pajamas, and in his weathered hands, he held a pump-action shotgun. Isolde Wycliffe, he said, his voice like gravel grinding. 20 years, and you show up with a Wardwell at your back. The shotgun didn't waver. Your father would weep. My father's dead because of secrets, Isolde said. I'm done running from them. Thaddeus's gaze shifted to Atticus. And you, Sylvester's whelp, you here to finish the purge? I'm here for the ledger, Atticus said flatly. Of course you are. Thaddeus lowered the shotgun, suddenly looking every one of his 80-some years. Everyone wants the ledger. No one wants the cost. He gestured toward the cabin. Come, let's get this over with. The cabin smelled of mildew and old coffee. Thaddeus moved aside a stack of navigation charts and knelt beside a rusted floor panel. His arthritic fingers worked the latch, and with a groan of protesting metal, he lifted it to reveal a waterproof container. Inside was a leather briefcase, scarred and aged, with brass clasps that had gone green with oxidation. Your father gave this to me the night before they came for him, Thaddeus said, lifting it reverently. Told me if anything happened to the family, I was to keep it hidden until his daughter came of age. His eyes found Isolde's. Until you were strong enough to carry it. Isolde's hands trembled as she reached for the case. It was heavier than she expected. What's in it? Atticus asked. Sins, Thaddeus said simply. Every backdoor deal. In every bribe. Every body buried by every major family in the 5 boroughs. The Wardwells, the Kingsfords, the Lockwoods. Even the Wycliffes aren't clean. He looked at Isolde. Your father called it the Red Ledger because it was written in blood. Financial statements, wire transfers, witness testimonies, photographs. Enough evidence to bring down empires. Or build new ones, Isolde whispered. That's the question, isn't it? Thaddeus stepped back. Will you use it for justice or revenge? Will it crown you or kill you? Before Isolde could answer, Gideon's voice crackled through Atticus's earpiece. Sir, we have movement. Multiple contacts approaching from the south access. The cabin window exploded in a spray of glass. Thaddeus jerked backward, a red bloom spreading across his chest. The shotgun clattered to the floor. Down! Atticus tackled Isolde as another round punched through the cabin wall. Outside, the night erupted with gunfire, not the controlled precision of Wardwell guards, but the sustained automatic fire of professionals. Mercenaries. Isolde clutched the briefcase to her chest as Atticus returned fire through the shattered window. On the deck, she could hear Gideon shouting orders, but his voice was drowned out by the staccato rhythm of death. Thaddeus lay on the floor, his eyes already glassing over, blood pooling beneath him. "Go," he gasped, his hand reaching weakly toward Isolde. "The ledger is yours now." Then the light went out of his eyes, and Isolde realized with cold certainty that someone else knew about the briefcase. Someone who wanted everyone who touched it dead. The gunfire intensified, and converging on the trawler from 3 directions. Atticus moved with practiced efficiency, ejecting his magazine to check the count. 10 rounds left. Not enough. He yanked Isolde away from Thaddeus's body, shoving the briefcase into her arms. "Can you swim?" "What? Can you swim?" He fired twice through the doorway, dropping a shadow that had been advancing across the dock. "Yes, but..." "Then when I say go, you jump off the stern and you don't stop until you reach the mangroves. Understand?" Outside, one of the Wardwell guards screamed, a wet, gurgling sound that ended abruptly. Gideon's voice cut through the chaos, barking coordinates, but he was pinned down behind a concrete piling. The second guard wasn't responding at all. These weren't opportunistic thieves or rival family soldiers. This was a professional hit squad, all equipped with night vision and suppressed weapons, executing a tactical breach with military precision. Someone had known exactly where they'd be. Isolde's mind raced. "Atticus, this isn't random. They're not here for the ledger. They're here for us." A red laser dot swept across the cabin wall, and Isolde's instincts screamed. She grabbed Atticus's shoulder and yanked him sideways just as the wall behind him exploded, showering them with splinters. The round would have taken his head off. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Surprise, calculation, grudging recognition. "Sniper," she breathed. "Elevated position, probably the harbor master's roof." Atticus stared at her. "How do you..." "My father trained all his children." She pulled Thaddeus's shotgun from the floor, checking the chamber. 4 shells. Even the daughters. Another volley of gunfire raked the trawler's hull, and the boat began to list as water poured through the punctured sides. On the dock, a man emerged from the rain, tall, buzz-cut, moving with the methodical calm of a killer who'd done this 1,000 times. He wore tactical gear without insignia, and his rifle tracked across the trawler's cabin with lethal intent. "Stellan Aldridge," Atticus said, his voice tight with recognition. "South African mercenary. Works for the highest bidder." "Who's bidding?" "That's the million-dollar question." Gideon managed to drop one of the attackers, but another appeared immediately, laying down suppressing fire. The old consigliere was running out of ammunition and options. "We need to move now," Atticus said. "On 3. The trawler suddenly lurched as something heavy hit the deck. A cylindrical object rolled through the shattered doorway, hissing like a snake. Flashbang. Atticus grabbed Isolde and dove through the back window just as the world turned white, and the concussion wave hit like a physical blow. They plunged into the black water of the marina, the briefcase clutched between them, the cold shock stealing Isolde's breath. Underwater, the gunfire became muffled thumps. Isolde kicked hard, following Atticus's dark form through the murky water, her lungs already burning. Above them, the trawler was being systematically shredded by automatic fire. They surfaced behind a derelict sailboat, gasping, just as the Kingmaker finally gave up and began to sink, its cabin aflame despite the rain. "Gideon!" Atticus shouted. No response. On the dock, Stellan Aldridge stood in silhouette, calmly reloading. He spoke into his radio, his voice carrying across the water. "Primary targets in the water. Converging on extraction point Alpha. No survivors." "They're trying to kill both of us," Isolde hissed, wiping water from her eyes. "Your father's heir and the last Wycliffe. Someone wants the entire bloodline erased." Atticus's face was grim. "The SUV. If we can reach it, they'll be waiting. You have a better idea? A bullet pinged off the sailboat's hull, and the sniper's laser began sweeping the water. Isolde made the calculation in half a second. The enemy of my enemy isn't a friend, but he's better than a corpse. We go together. You drive, I'll shoot. You don't trust me. And you'd kill me the second this is over, Isolde shot back. But right now, we both want to live more than we want each other dead. Atticus considered this for exactly 1 second. Then he extended his hand. Truce, until we find out who hired Aldridge. Isolde gripped his hand, feeling the strength in it, the calluses of a man who'd done violence personally rather than delegating it. Truce, she agreed. Now move. They broke from cover together, sprinting low across the dock as gunfire erupted around them. Isolde raised the shotgun and fired blindly toward the harbormaster's office, the buckshot forcing the sniper to duck. Atticus returned fire with controlled bursts, dropping one mercenary and sending another diving for cover. The SUV was 50 feet away. 30. 20. Stellan Aldridge stepped into their path, his rifle rising. Isolde didn't hesitate. She swung the briefcase like a club, catching him across the jaw. He staggered, and Atticus put 2 rounds in his vest, not enough to kill, but enough to buy them seconds. They dove into the SUV, Atticus jamming the key into the ignition as bullets spiderwebbed the windshield. The engine roared to life, and he threw it into reverse, tires screaming. Behind them, the marina burned, and in the flames, Isolde could see shadows regrouping, reloading. Coming after them. Where? Atticus demanded, whipping the SUV onto the access road. Isolde held the briefcase against her chest, Thaddeus's blood still wet on the leather. Somewhere they won't think to look, she said. Somewhere off the grid. I know a place. And as the SUV disappeared into the rain-soaked night, neither of them noticed the small tracking device blinking silently inside the briefcase's hidden lining, transmitting their location to someone who was playing a much longer game. The safe house was a hunting cabin buried deep in the sawgrass marshlands west of Lake Okeechobee, accessible only by an unmarked dirt road that disappeared into standing water during the rainy season. Atticus killed the headlights a quarter-mile out and navigated by memory, the SUV's undercarriage scraping against submerged roots. Beside him, Isolde sat rigid, the briefcase on her lap, the shotgun braced against her shoulder. She hadn't said a word since they'd escaped the marina, but her eyes never stopped moving, checking mirrors, scanning tree lines, calculating angles of attack. She thought like a soldier, like someone who'd been at war her entire life. The cabin was barely more than a shack, weathered cypress walls, a rusted tin roof, windows covered with plywood. Atticus had bought it through a shell corporation 5 years ago, a bolt hole that not even his father knew about. A place to disappear if the Empire ever turned on him. He'd never imagined he'd be hiding here with a Wycliffe. Inside, the air was thick with humidity and the smell of mildew. Atticus lit a kerosene lamp while Isolde swept the 2-room space with professional efficiency, checking corners, testing floorboards, examining the single exit. No back door, she observed. There's a boat under the dock. Outboard motor, full tank. If we're compromised, we go through the window and into the swamp. You've planned for this? I've planned for everything. Isolde set the briefcase on the scarred wooden table and finally lowered the shotgun. In the lamplight, she looked different. Wet hair plastered to her face, the shy waitress persona completely stripped away. She moved with economical grace, touching her ribs where Gideon's gun had pressed, checking herself for injuries with clinical detachment. Atticus found himself watching her, reassessing everything he'd assumed. Your father taught you to fight, he said. My father taught me to survive. She met his eyes. There's a difference, Is there? Fighting is about winning. Survival is about making sure the other person loses more. She pulled off her soaked shirt without self-consciousness, more revealing a black sports bra and a torso marked with old scars. Burn marks. What looked like a healed bullet graze across her ribs. You learn that when you're 9 years old and your family is executed in front of you. The words hung between them like an accusation. Atticus opened a footlocker and pulled out a dry flannel shirt, tossing it to her. I didn't know about the purge until after it happened. I was 12, away at boarding school. My father called and said the Wycliffe problem had been resolved. Problem, Isolde repeated bitterly, pulling on the shirt. My father was a problem. My mother was a problem. My 6-year-old brother was a problem that needed resolving. I'm not defending it. Then why are you here? Why are you still doing his work? Atticus didn't have a good answer. Loyalty, fear, and the gravitational pull of power and blood? He'd asked himself that question 1,000 times, usually at 3 in the morning when the bodies piled up in his memory. Because I thought I could change it from the inside, he said finally. Make the family legitimate. Clean. There's no such thing as clean money when it's built on corpses. Before Atticus could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. Your father is looking for you. So am I. Isolde saw his expression change. What is it? Roscoe Lockhart. Atticus showed her the message. My father's consigliere. Threatening you? Warning me, or threatening me. With Roscoe, it's hard to tell the difference. Another text came through. A photo this time. It showed Gideon's body, face down on the marina dock, and Stellan Aldridge standing over him. The timestamp was 15 minutes old. Isolde leaned in to look. That's the mercenary from the dock. Working for Roscoe. Atticus felt the pieces clicking into place, cold and inevitable. He's staging a coup. Kill me, kill you, blame it on a Wycliffe revenge plot. My father loses his heir and his mind. Roscoe steps in to stabilize the family, and by the time Sylvester realizes what's happened, it's too late. Why kill me too? I'm nobody to him. You're the ledger, you're leverage, and you're proof that the Wycliffe line isn't extinct. Atticus paced the small room, his mind racing. If you surface with that briefcase, every family in the 5 boroughs goes to war. Roscoe doesn't want chaos. He wants control, clean transition, no loose ends. So we're both loose ends. Until dawn, when he can claim we killed each other in a mutual vendetta. Atticus stopped, looking at her. He's probably already planting the narrative. Star-crossed enemies, blood feud, tragic ending. Isolde opened the briefcase, staring at the contents. Thick folders, photographs, financial documents wrapped in plastic. 20 years of secrets, preserved and waiting. Then we don't give him the ending he wants, she said quietly. We change the script. How? We give your father something he wants more than revenge. She pulled out a folder marked Lockhart Financial Holdings in faded ink. We give him proof that his most trusted advisor has been robbing him blind for a decade. Atticus moved closer, reading over her shoulder. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Real estate purchases under shell corporations. Meeting notes discussing percentages and territorial divisions that excluded Sylvester entirely. Roscoe's been building his own empire inside ours, Atticus breathed. And now he's moving to take it all. Isolde looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw not the trembling waitress or the vengeful survivor, but something sharper. A strategist. A queen in exile who'd learned to play the long game. You help me expose him, she said, and I'll give you the ledger. All of it. Everything my father collected on the Wardwells, buried so deep not even federal prosecutors could find it. Why would you do that? Because I don't want revenge anymore. Her voice was steady, certain. I want something better. I want the empire that killed my family to eat itself from the inside. And then I want to build something new from the ashes. Atticus studied her face in the lamplight, seeing the truth of it. She wasn't lying. She was offering him an alliance. Dangerous, fragile, built on mutual destruction. Truce until dawn, he said. Truce until Roscoe is dead, Isolde countered. They shook on it, and this time neither one let go immediately. Outside, the swamp sang with insects and darkness, and somewhere in the night, Roscoe Lockhart's hunters were closing in. But inside the cabin, two enemies had become something more dangerous. They'd become allies. By the time they reached West Palm Beach, the rain had stopped, and the first gray light of dawn was bleeding across the Atlantic. Atticus's penthouse occupied the top floor of a glass tower on Flagler Drive, overlooking the intracoastal waterway. He parked in the private garage and led Isolde through a service elevator that required both a key card and a thumbprint. Security measures that seemed almost quaint after the night they'd survived. The doors opened directly into the apartment, and Isolde stopped, genuinely surprised. She'd expected cold minimalism, the sterile aesthetic of old money. Instead, she found herself standing in an artist's studio disguised as a living space. Canvases lined the walls, seascapes, portraits, abstract explosions of color. Some were finished, museum quality. Others were half-completed, abandoned mid-brushstroke. Paint-stained drop-cloths covered sections of the hardwood floor. The smell of linseed oil and turpentine hung in the air. "You paint?" she said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Atticus moved past her, checking the windows. My father thinks I'm at the gym when I come here. Considers art a waste of time. Weak. Isolde walked slowly through the space, studying the work. There was violence in some of the paintings, dark, turbulent pieces that looked like storms trying to tear themselves apart. But others were achingly beautiful, capturing light on water with a tenderness that seemed impossible from a man who killed for a living. "These are good," she said. "Actually good." "Don't sound so shocked." "I just didn't think—" She stopped in front of a portrait of a young boy, maybe 7 or 8, laughing on a beach. "Who is this?" Atticus's expression shuddered. "My younger brother, Marco. He died when I was 15, leukemia." "I'm sorry." "So was my father. He'd groomed Marco to be the heir, the smart one, the diplomatic one. When he died, I became the spare who had to step up." Atticus turned away from the painting. "I was never supposed to be this." Isolde understood that in her bones. She'd never been supposed to be a ghost, a waitress, a survivor haunted by the dead. She'd been supposed to be a daughter, a sister, maybe eventually a wife and mother in the old tradition, but violence had other plans. She set the briefcase on the glass dining table and opened it, spreading out the contents. As she reached for the Lockhart files, her fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A small metallic disc, no bigger than a quarter, magnetically attached to the interior lining. Her blood went cold. "Atticus." He was beside her in an instant. "What is it?" She held up the tracking device. "We didn't lose them at the swamp. We led them right here." For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Atticus was at the window, scanning the street below. A black van was parked across from the building's entrance, another at the service exit. As he watched, a third vehicle pulled up, and men in tactical gear began to deploy with practiced efficiency. "Roscoe's cleaners," he said. "At least a dozen, maybe more. They'll hit us from multiple entry points. Elevator, stairwell, maybe rappel from the roof." "How long do we have?" 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if they're cautious. Isolde's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds and outcomes. They couldn't run. The building was already surrounded. They couldn't hide. Thermal imaging would find them in minutes. They couldn't win, not against a professional hit squad with superior numbers and firepower. But they could do something Roscoe wouldn't expect. "We make our stand here," she said. "But not to survive. To win." Against a dozen mercenaries? Against Roscoe. She began pulling specific documents from the briefcase, the most damning evidence of his embezzlement, his side deals, his slow-motion coup. "He wants us dead before your father finds out what he's been doing. So we make sure Sylvester learns the truth. He's not going to take a phone call from me right now. Not after I disappeared with you. Then we make him come here, in person." Isolde held up her phone. "I send him proof that I have the ledger. I offer him a trade, his son's life for the briefcase. He'll come." "And walk into the same trap we're in?" "No." Isolde's smile was sharp, dangerous. "He walks into Roscoe's betrayal. We give Roscoe exactly what he wants. The briefcase, the leverage, the crown. And when he takes it in front of your father, Sylvester will see the truth." Atticus stared at her. "You're going to bluff with an empty briefcase." "Not empty. Filled with everything except what Roscoe actually wants. The Wardwell files. Those we hide. The rest? We let him take. Let him think he's won." She met his eyes. "Can you sell it? Can you play the desperate son trying to save his own life? Can you play the vengeful daughter finally getting her pound of flesh?" They stood facing each other across the table. Two people who should have been enemies, bound together by survival and something more complicated. Recognition, maybe. Respect. The understanding that they were both prisoners of their family names, trying to carve out something that belonged only to them. "I'm sorry about your family," Atticus said quietly. "Genuinely. What my father did was monstrous." "I'm sorry about your brother," Isolde replied. "About what you had to become." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. Truth in a world built on lies. "If this works," Atticus said, "if we survive, one crisis at a time." He nodded, then moved to a concealed panel in the wall, revealing a weapons cache that would make a small militia jealous. He began loading magazines, checking actions, while Isolde positioned furniture to create firing lanes and cover points. They had 12 minutes, and a briefcase full of secrets that would either save them or bury them. Outside, the sun continued to rise over the Atlantic, indifferent and beautiful, as violence prepared to come calling one more time. The elevator chimed at exactly 6:47 a.m. Atticus stood in the center of the penthouse, hands raised, and the briefcase at his feet. Isolde was hidden behind the kitchen island, a pistol in each hand, watching through the reflection in a strategically angled mirror. The doors opened, and Roscoe Lockhart stepped out flanked by 4 mercenaries in tactical gear. He was a small man, precise and unremarkable, the kind of person who'd spent a lifetime being underestimated. He wore an expensive suit despite the hour, not a hair out of place, looking more like an investment banker than a traitor orchestrating a coup. But it was the man they dragged in behind him that made Atticus's breath catch. Don Sylvester Wardwell looked 20 years older than he had 12 hours ago. His cream linen suit was torn and blood-stained, his fedora gone, his silver hair matted with dried blood. They'd beaten him badly. His left eye was swollen shut, his lips split, and he moved with the careful stiffness of broken ribs. Yet his good eyes still burned with rage. "Father," Atticus breathed. "Don't," Sylvester rasped. "Don't give him anything." Roscoe smiled, a thin expression devoid of warmth. Touching. The prodigal son, still loyal. He gestured, and one of the mercenaries pressed a gun to Sylvester's temple. "The briefcase, Atticus. Now, or I paint these very expensive walls with your father's brains." "You won't kill him," Atticus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. He's your only leverage. I have plenty of leverage. A dead Don, a missing heir, and a briefcase full of evidence that the Wycliffe girl murdered you both in a revenge plot. Roscoe's eyes glittered. I've already positioned the narrative. By noon, I'll be the grieving consigliere stepping up to prevent a war. By tonight, I'll control the 5 boroughs. Roscoe! Sylvester spat blood onto the floor. You disloyal bastard! I made you. I trusted. The mercenary hit him across the face with the pistol, and the old Don dropped to his knees. Atticus felt rage surge through him, but he forced himself to remain still. Trust the plan. Trust her. The briefcase, Roscoe repeated. 3 seconds, then he dies. Take it, Atticus said, kicking it forward. Take the damn thing and let him go. Roscoe's smile widened. He gestured to one of his men, who retrieved the briefcase and brought it to him. As Roscoe opened the clasps, running his fingers over the documents inside, Isolde made her move. She stepped out from behind the island, both pistols trained on Roscoe's head. Hello, Roscoe. Oh, I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Every gun in the room swiveled toward her, but she didn't flinch. Isolde Wycliffe, Roscoe said, recovering quickly. The ghost made flesh. How disappointing that you'll die the same way as the rest of your family. Will I? She moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Because I've spent the last 3 hours reading that ledger. Every page, every transaction, every dirty secret. She tilted her head. Including page 47. The one about your Cayman Islands accounts, and the $15 million you've been skimming from Wardwell shipping operations. Roscoe's face went very still. Page 62, Isolde continued, her voice carrying now, making sure Sylvester could hear every word. Oh, the real estate holdings in Miami Beach purchased with Wardwell money, but titled to your nephew. Page 91. The meeting notes where you discussed eliminating Sylvester and framing it as a heart attack. You're bluffing, Roscoe said, but his hand trembled slightly on the briefcase. Am I? Check page 47 yourself. The wire transfer from March 15th, 2023. Wardwell Shipping to Prometheus Holdings, LLC. Your shell company. $15.3 million. Roscoe's eyes dropped to the briefcase, unable to resist. He flipped through the documents frantically, searching for the page that would prove her wrong, and found it. His face went white. How? He looked up at Isolde, then at Atticus, realization dawning. You read the ledger. You know everything. Everything, Atticus confirmed, none including the fact that you've been planning this coup for 3 years, that you hired Stellan Aldridge 6 months ago, that you were never loyal to my father. You were just waiting for the right moment to take everything he built. Sylvester, still on his knees, began to laugh. It was a terrible sound, wet and broken. Roscoe, the old Don said, you insignificant worm. Did you really think? I think I'm smarter than a dying old man clinging to the past. Roscoe's composure finally cracked. You and your codes, your honor, your old ways. The world has moved on, Sylvester. You're a relic. I've been running this organization for the last 5 years while you played Don Corleone. Then why do you need him dead? Isolde asked softly. If you're so powerful, why not just take it? Because power isn't given, girl. It's taken. And men like Sylvester don't step aside. They have to be removed. Roscoe pulled a pistol from his jacket. Which is what I'm going to do, right? Sylvester moved. For a man in his late 60s with broken ribs and a concussion, he moved with shocking speed. His hand shot out, grabbing the ankle of the mercenary beside him, yanking hard. The man stumbled, and Sylvester caught his falling pistol mid-air. 3 shots. The first took Roscoe in the shoulder, spinning him. The second caught the mercenary who'd been holding the briefcase. The third went into Roscoe's chest, center mass, and the traitor's eyes went wide with disbelief. You, you can't. I'm the Don, Sylvester said, his voice iron despite the blood running down his face. And you forgot the first rule, Roscoe. In this family, betrayal is paid in blood. The fourth shot was execution. Clean. Final. Roscoe Lockhart collapsed, the briefcase spilling from his dead fingers. The remaining mercenaries froze, caught between their dead employer and a Don who'd just killed a man from his knees. Atticus's gun was already up, as were Isolde's. "Drop your weapons," Atticus commanded. "Your contract ended with Roscoe. Walk away or join him." Professional killers knew when a job was over. One by one, they placed their weapons on the floor and backed toward the elevator. When the doors closed, leaving only family and ghosts, Sylvester finally allowed himself to collapse fully. Atticus caught him, easing him down. "Father!" "The girl," Sylvester interrupted, his good eye finding Isolde. "Isolde Wycliffe, come here." She approached cautiously, pistols still ready. Sylvester studied her face with something like wonder. "You have your father's eyes. And his spine." He coughed, wincing. "I owed him a debt once. Long time ago. Before the territories, before the war. He saved my life in Palermo." "Then why did you kill him?" Isolde's voice shook with 20 years of grief and rage. "Because he chose honor over survival. Because he wouldn't bend. Because..." Sylvester's voice dropped. "Because I was afraid of what he represented. A better man. A better way." He reached out a trembling hand. "I can't give you your family back, but I can end this. The blood feud. The vendetta. It dies here. With Roscoe's betrayal." Isolde stared at the offered hand, feeling the weight of 2 decades pressing down on her. Then she took it. "It ends here," she agreed. "But the ledger stays with me." Insurance." Sylvester smiled, showing blood-stained teeth. "Smart girl. Your father would be proud." And in the morning light streaming through the penthouse windows, 3 people who should have been enemies made peace over the body of a traitor, rewriting the future one bloody page at a time. 6 months later, the Gilded Lily reopened under new ownership. The Palm Beach Society pages speculated endlessly about the anonymous buyers who'd purchased the restaurant and spent $3 million on renovations. Some whispered it was a tech billionaire seeking privacy. Others suggested a European royal family establishing an American foothold. No one guessed the truth, that the deed was held by a shell corporation buried so deep in legal entities that even federal investigators would need a year to untangle it. The opening night gala was the event of the season. Worth Avenue glittered with limousines and camera flashes as Florida's elite arrived in designer gowns and handmade suits, desperate for an invitation that had become the most coveted piece of paper in the state. Isolde Thatcher, now Isolde Kingsford, though she'd kept her assumed surname professionally, stood at the top of the marble staircase in a midnight blue Valentino gown that cost more than she'd earned in 3 years of waitressing. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, diamond earrings catching the light. She looked every inch the socialite, the philanthropist, the mysterious woman who'd somehow captured the heart of Atticus Kingsford and brokered peace between warring factions of the Five Boroughs. The shy waitress was dead. Long live the queen. Atticus stood beside her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. To the watching crowd, they were the perfect power couple. Beautiful, dangerous, untouchable. What the crowd didn't know was that the ledger still existed, locked in a vault that only Isolde could access. Insurance against the day someone forgot the lessons written in Roscoe Lockhart's blood. "Ready?" Atticus murmured against her ear. "I've been ready for 20 years." They descended together, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Casper Norwood, the former floor manager who'd once snapped his fingers at Isolde, now stood near the host stand looking diminished and nervous. When he saw her, recognition flickered across his face. Confusion, then shock, then carefully concealed fear. He bowed slightly, and Isolde gave him the barest nod of acknowledgement. He would keep his job. For now. As a reminder of what she'd survived. "Mrs. Kingsford," a woman's voice called out, honey-sweet and laced with calculation. Cordelia Fenmore, heiress to a shipping fortune, approached with her husband in tow. 6 months ago, she'd watched Isolde pour her water without a second glance. Tonight, she extended both hands in greeting. What an absolutely stunning transformation. "You must tell me who did the interior design." "I had some help," Isolde said smoothly. "But the vision was always mine. I know what it's like to be invisible in a place like this. I wanted to create something different." "Well, it's magnificent. And might I say, your wedding was the event of the century. I'm still devastated we were traveling when—" "You weren't invited," Atticus interjected pleasantly. "It was family only." Cordelia's smile froze, and Isolde allowed herself a small, private satisfaction. The wedding had been small, private, and held in a location known only to Sylvester and a handful of trusted guards. No photographs, no press. Just vows exchanged at sunset with the Atlantic as witness. A marriage born from survival, but growing into something neither of them had expected. Partnership, trust, maybe even love, though neither would say the word aloud yet. "Isolde." Sylvester Wardwell's voice cut through the crowd's murmur. The Don approached slowly, still using his cane but looking healthier than he had in months. He'd officially retired, on turning control of the family operations over to Atticus while maintaining the title and respect. "A word?" They moved to a quiet corner of the terrace, away from prying eyes and listening ears. "I wanted you to know," Sylvester said, his voice low and rough. "I've made arrangements. The families who supported Roscoe's coup have been educated about the new order. There will be no more challenges to your position. No more questions about the Wycliffe name." "I appreciate that." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for gratitude." He looked out at the ocean, his weathered face illuminated by the restaurant's lights. "Your father once told me that power without legitimacy is just violence waiting to collapse. I didn't understand him then. I thought strength was enough." He turned back to her. "You've proven him right. You took a blood feud and turned it into a dynasty. That's not strength. That's wisdom." Isolde felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of letting go. "He would have appreciated hearing you say that." "I know." Sylvester tapped his cane against the ground once, a gesture of finality. "Make it count, Isolde. Make the kingdom you're building worthy of the price you paid for it." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing alone on the terrace overlooking the water. Atticus found her there minutes later, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. What did he say? That we have a chance to build something better. She took the glass, watching the golden liquid catch the light. "No pressure." "None at all." Atticus raised his glass. To building kingdoms. To surviving them first," Isolde countered. They drank, and below them, the gilded lily hummed with life and laughter and power changing hands in whispered conversations. The ghost of Worth Avenue had become flesh and blood and will. The shy waitress who'd trembled over water glasses now commanded rooms with a single glance. And somewhere in the hidden places of Palm Beach, in the dark corners where deals were struck and futures decided, people were learning a new truth. The most dangerous weapon in Florida wasn't a gun, or a ledger, or even a name. It was a woman who knew exactly when to speak, and when to let silence do the killing. Isolde Wycliffe Kingsford had survived the massacre, the exile, the blood feud, and the betrayal. Now she would do something infinitely more difficult. She would build an empire worth keeping, and heaven help anyone who stood in her way. The ghost had become the queen. And in Palm Beach, where power was the only currency that mattered, everyone, from the old Dons to the new money billionaires, now understood one fundamental truth. Never underestimate the girl who pours your water. She might just be counting the ways to poison it. If you enjoyed Isolde's rise from invisible waitress to queen of the Five Boroughs, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of power, betrayal, and unlikely heroes who refuse to stay in the shadows.